I am telling this story because what happened to me began as a medical issue and ended as a fatal mistake that could have been prevented if I had trusted the obvious signs. I was a 32-year-old woman living alone and working long shifts, and my sleep started breaking down in ways I could not control or ignore. Every night I woke up at exactly the same time, and the digital clock on my bedside table always showed 3:17 without exception. I would be fully awake, sitting upright, with my bedroom unchanged and silent, and the door always closed the way I left it. At first, I assumed it was stress, because my job required long hours and constant deadlines, and exhaustion felt like a reasonable explanation. After a week of this pattern, I noticed something more specific, because I always woke up with the same sentence echoing clearly in my head. The sentence was calm, slow, and precise, and it said that everything was fine and that I needed to stay asleep. I tried changing my routine, stopped caffeine, adjusted lighting, and followed every standard recommendation without improvement. The repetition became predictable enough that I could mark it on a calendar, which made it more disturbing rather than reassuring. I scheduled an appointment with a sleep specialist after nearly collapsing at work from fatigue. The doctor listened carefully while typing notes, and her office was quiet, clean, and intentionally neutral. I told her about the timing, the sentence, and the sense that the wake-ups felt rehearsed rather than random. She nodded calmly and said it was a recurring nightmare pattern caused by exhaustion, and suggested short-term medication. She told me not to worry and said my mind was creating false awakenings that felt real. I accepted her explanation because it fit the facts I wanted to believe. The medication helped me fall asleep faster, but it did not change the timing of my awakenings. At 3:17, I still opened my eyes, but now I felt slower, heavier, and less able to move. I noticed my bedroom door was no longer always closed when I woke up. Sometimes it was open just enough to see the hallway light. I checked my apartment thoroughly during the day and found nothing out of place. The second visit to the doctor felt shorter, and she seemed more confident than concerned. She increased the dosage and told me consistency was important. That night, I woke again at 3:17, and the door was fully open. The hallway light was on, even though I always turned it off before bed. I sat up and checked my phone, which showed no missed calls or alerts. I stood up and walked through the apartment, confirming the locks were secure. When I returned to bed, the clock still read 3:17. The next morning, I noticed fingerprints on the hallway wall near my bedroom door. They were at shoulder height and slightly smeared. I cleaned them and told myself I must have leaned there while half asleep. On my third appointment, the doctor smiled and said progress often feels worse before it improves. She told me not to overanalyze physical details during episodes. That night, I woke again at 3:17, and the sentence played in my head clearly and slowly. The bedroom door was open, and the hallway light was off. I heard movement near the doorframe, not loud, but deliberate. I stayed still until the sound stopped. That's when I thought it was over. I had no idea what was about to happen next. The story isn't over. Subscribe to continue. The next morning, I found a faint shoe mark on the carpet near my bed, and it did not match any shoes I owned. I photographed it and brought the image to my next appointment. The doctor glanced at it briefly and said sleepwalking could explain unfamiliar marks. She reminded me that exhaustion distorts perception and increases anxiety-driven interpretations. I noticed her tone was firmer than before, and she avoided looking at me for long. That night, I placed my phone on video recording before going to bed, aimed toward the bedroom door. I woke at 3:17 as usual, unable to remember any dream beforehand. The door was closed, and the room was quiet. I stayed still and waited. At 3:19, the door opened inward slowly. The video captured the movement clearly. A woman stepped partially into frame and stopped near the foot of my bed. The lighting was low, but sufficient to identify her. It was the doctor. She stood still for several seconds, then stepped back and closed the door. The video ended when my phone battery died. I did not scream or move because my body felt delayed and unresponsive. When I checked the locks in the morning, nothing was broken. I replayed the video repeatedly to confirm I was not mistaken. Her face, posture, and clothing were unmistakable. I skipped work and drove to her office without an appointment. The receptionist said she was unavailable. I asked if anyone else used the building at night. She said the security logs showed no after-hours access. That night, I did not take the medication. I placed a chair under the door handle and stayed awake. At 3:17, the hallway light turned on by itself. The door handle moved downward until the chair slid slightly across the floor. I recorded everything with my phone while backing away. The handle stopped moving after several seconds. I left the apartment before sunrise and slept in my car. The following day, I confronted her directly in her office. She did not deny entering my apartment. She said the medication caused confusion and that I needed supervision. She said my safety required compliance. She told me resisting treatment would make things worse. That night, she sent me a message reminding me to take the medication. I did not respond. At 3:17, my phone rang once and stopped. I watched from my car as the light in my apartment turned on. I saw her silhouette move past the window. I understood then that the visits were not accidental or therapeutic. They were rehearsed. I realized the sentence I heard every night was the same sentence she used during sessions. She had taught my brain when to stop reacting. I knew she would escalate. I returned to the apartment the next night to retrieve essential items. I carried my phone, my keys, and a heavy object from the kitchen. At 3:17, the door unlocked from the outside. She entered calmly, speaking in the same measured tone she used in the office. She said this was the safest way to handle things. She moved toward me without hesitation. I backed away while keeping my phone recording. She told me to stay still. She said the medication would make this easier. I struck her once when she reached for me. She fell backward and hit her head on the counter. She did not move again. I stood there waiting for her to get up. She did not. I checked her pulse and found none. The clock on the wall read 3:19. I sat on the floor until sunrise. I did not call anyone. I left the apartment and never returned. The video remained on my phone. I deleted it after watching it one final time. I moved to another city and stopped seeking treatment entirely. I stopped sleeping through the night. I wake up now without medication. I still check the clock when I wake up. It no longer says 3:17. It says different times, which is how I know I am awake. I replay the events exactly as they happened. I remember her confidence more than her presence. I remember how easily authority turned into access. I remember how training someone to stay calm can become a weapon. I live with the fact that I survived because I acted first. I live with the fact that someone died because I acted at all. There was no misunderstanding. There was no accident. The danger was real and built slowly through trust. I tell this story because the steps matter. It started with fatigue. It continued with reassurance. It ended with certainty. I do not take sleep aids anymore. I do not close my bedroom door. I do not ignore repeated patterns. I know exactly how this ended. One last question. If you were in her place at that moment, would you have done the same? Be honest. What does her choice deserve out of 10? Subscribe now. The best story is coming next.